Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yes? No? Maybe? Anyone? Yes? Cool. So, as mentioned, I'm Yoel. I'm based in London, and my presentation doesn't work. Yes. So, we started using React Native very, very recently, and my team, which is like 5 people, are in charge of integrating React Native into our existing application. And a bit about Skyscanner. We are a traveling application and website. We do flight search, hotels, and car hire. We have roughly 40 plus native developers and over 400 web developers that are using React.js on the website. Now, out of that, we have me and 4 other brave men that are doing React Native and integrating it. Hence, we need a lot of bridging because we can't really rewrite the whole application in React Native. So we need to leverage our existing code base, our existing analytics platform, our existing rendering, and so on and so forth. So bridges are critical, and since they are so critical, we need to test them. There were a lot of talks about how to create a bridge, but not so much about how to automatically test your bridge. Specifically, in our case, we first look at the Facebook example, the simple integration test that you can find in the Facebook website. So first of all, you run, this is iOS specifically. So first of all, you run this command, run test with a specific module. The module is basically the component name that you want to run from JavaScript. It loads the test component, and then the component did mount is called. And again, and then the first test runs all the way to the nth test. And if you have an exception, if you have an error, you throw an exception, the test fails. And if you mark the test completed, the tests pass. Now, just important thing to note here, test 1 calls test 2 at the end of the test. The test method itself needs to call the test 2 method that needs to call the test 3. So if, for example, you decided to add another test, you either add it at the end because it's simpler, and then you need to move the mark test complete to the new one, or you start doing your linked list management by yourself, which is extra fun. You need to do the mark test as completed within 2 minutes, otherwise the whole test will fail. And all tests appear as a single kind of green checkbox in Xcode. So you run a whole suite of tests on your bridge, and you get one like, okay, everything went well. A bit about the pros and cons of that. So pros, it's officially supported. Like the component is there. There are several code samples of Facebook bridges that are tested this way. And it's used and tested. The problem is, as I showed earlier, there is a strong dependency between the tests. They need to run consecutively, and if you want to change the order, good luck. It's not much fun. It's very hard to test to realize what test failed, because once one test fails, you throw an exception, and the whole test suite fails, basically. And this precondition setup, which is very important to us, because what we bridge are things that rely on other native components. So, for example, if we have the authentication bridge, it relies on the authentication service or the authentication component, and that thing needs to be mocked. We don't want to run the test on like a real live data. So in order to mock that, we need some precondition. The preconditions are always the same for all your suite of tests, because you only touch the native side once you trigger the test. So and you can also not you cannot specify a timeout that is shorter than 2 minutes, at least not in the current version. And the failing test stops the whole run. So if your third test run failed, it wouldn't run the fourth and the fifth and so on. Now, we use the same platform, but we tweaked it a little bit so that it will be nicer and easier for us to test and to run it in the CI. So first of all, we use the same run test, but this time we also pass in initial parameters to the test component. And in those initial parameters, we pass two things. First of all is the test method name that needs to be run from JavaScript, and the second thing is a timeout. The timeout is very simple. It's a simple like JavaScript timeout, and if the timeout exceeds, we throw an exception, and the test will fail. Then we load the same way. We load the test component. In the component did load, it looks for the test method using simple JavaScript like square notation, and runs the test method. Now, another thing to note about this, the test method in the native side and the test method in the JavaScript side, just as a convenience, we use the same name. So like in Objective-C, you can say, what's the name of the current function that I'm running? And we use that, and we pass that through the bridge as the test method name. And then we run the test method. If it fails, we throw an exception, and the test fails. And if it's marked as completed, it means that it passed. And we see it for each individual test method in Xcode. We see an equivalent JavaScript command that actually calls the bridge. And we see a green arrow or red cross based on whether it failed or passed. So a bit about the pros and cons of this one. Pros, every test method is separated in Xcode, so it's really easy to see what passed and what failed. Tests are isolated, so we don't have to run one from the other, so no more linked list management and craziness like that. You can specify the preconditions for each test individually. You can override timeout so that you don't need, like, if your test hangs for some reason because of something you forgot to do or some changes that were made, you won't need to wait 2 minutes on your CI just for the test to fail. And the failing test doesn't stop the execution, so if one test fails, the rest can run freely and just give you the results. One small con is the fact that you need to maintain both like the JavaScript and the native side in sync. They have to have the same name, but that's not a huge issue. And the other one is there might be slight kind of performance penalty because you go back and forth through the bridge. But when you think about bridge testing and integration testing in that sense, you do that anyway. So I would argue that that's a small price to pay to have an isolated test suite. And that's it. Thank you very much.